The sun was high over Umudim village, casting long shadows on the red, dusty ground. The air was filled with the scent of roasted maize and burning firewood. Children ran through the narrow paths, barefoot, laughing as they chased after each other. The village looked peaceful, but something was changing. A tall man in a well-ironed white shirt and black trousers walked slowly through the market square. His black briefcase swung by his side. The villagers paused and stared. Some whispered. Others greeted him with surprise. "Is that not Nenze Obinna?" Mama Ejiro asked, her hand on her chest. "It is him." "Obinna has come back," shouted Papa Chuka, dropping the bag of yam he was carrying. Obinna Nwankwo, once the brilliant boy of Umudim, had returned after 20 years. He had gone to the city, studied hard, and become a teacher. Now he was back, not just as a teacher, but as the new headmaster of Umudim Central School. His face carried the calmness of someone who had seen both light and darkness. His eyes were sharp, always watching. His voice was soft but firm. He greeted the elders at the square and continued towards the school building, which stood like an old soldier at the edge of the village. Faded walls, broken windows, and a rusty signboard that read, "Umudim Central School, Knowledge is Power." Obinna stopped in front of it, staring for a while. Memories flooded his mind. The classrooms where he once sat, the cane of Mr. Igwe, the old headmaster, the mango tree where he used to hide during break time. The village had called him back to bring life to the dying school. But there was something else, something hidden, a secret buried deep in Umudim that only a few people knew. And now that Obinna was back, that secret was about to be unearthed. But the question was, would the village be ready for what would come? The next morning, a thin mist hovered over Umudim. Birds chirped lazily in the trees, and the village began to wake. Smoke rose from kitchen fires, and the smell of akamu and akara drifted through the air. Obinna stood outside the headmaster's quarters, sipping hot tea from an old metal cup. He watched the school compound come alive. A few children were already sweeping the classrooms, their bare feet brushing over the cold cement floors. "Good morning, sir," they chorused when they saw him. He nodded with a small smile. "Well done, my children." Inside the staff room, everything was still the same. The wooden table he had once polished as a pupil was still there, now older and full of scratches. The walls were stained, and the ceiling had brown watermarks. But Obinna didn't complain. He was home. Soon, the teachers began to arrive. One by one, they stepped into the staff room with cautious eyes. They greeted him respectfully, but there was something else. Hesitation. Fear? Distrust? He couldn't tell yet. "Good morning, headmaster," a voice said boldly. It was Mrs. Uchechi, the oldest teacher in the school. Her grey scarf was tied tightly on her head, and her eyes scanned Obinna from head to toe. She smiled, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Obinna returned the greeting warmly. "It's good to see you again, Auntie Uchechi. You taught me mathematics, remember?" She nodded slowly. "I remember, Obinna. You were one of the smart ones. Welcome back." As the bell rang for assembly, Obinna stepped out to address the students for the first time. The children stood in crooked lines, some barefoot, some in torn uniforms. His heart ached. "My dear pupils," he began, "this school will become a place of greatness again. I promise you." The children clapped, but among the teachers standing behind him there were no smiles, only blank stares. It was as if his words had stirred something they wished would remain buried. Later that day, Obinna heard it. The whispers. "He shouldn't have come back. They say he's digging into things that don't concern him. Does he know what happened to the last headmaster?" Obinna's heart skipped a beat. The last headmaster? He thought the man had retired. But from the look in the teacher's eyes, it seemed he had just asked the wrong question. That evening, Obinna sat under the old mango tree behind the school. The breeze was cool, and the leaves danced gently above him. He held a worn ledger book, the school's old records. The pages were dusty, many torn, but he flipped through slowly, searching for something, anything. Then he found it, a list of headmasters from the school's beginning until now. He read each name carefully. Mr. Ikenna, 1975 to 1980. Mr. Igwe, 1985 to 1999. Mr. Okori, 1999 to nothing. The rest of the line was blank. The next entry jumped straight to Headmaster, acting, Mrs. Uchechi. Obinna frowned. Why wasn't there an end date for Mr. Okori? Why didn't it say he retired, resigned, or was transferred? That night, he walked to the village square where the elders usually gathered. They sat under the big ube tree, chewing kola nut and drinking palm wine. "Obinna, no, come and sit," Chief Mumba said, making space for him. After some greetings, Obinna cleared his throat. "Please, I want to ask about Mr. Okori, the last headmaster. What happened to him?" The elders fell silent. Even the crickets seemed to stop singing. He left," one of them mumbled. "Left to where?" Obinna pressed. "He resigned." Chief Mbia added quickly, but his voice lacked confidence. Obinna watched their faces. They were hiding something. He could feel it. Later, as he walked back through the narrow bush path to his quarters, he heard footsteps behind him. He stopped. The steps stopped too. He turned quickly. No one. He continued, now walking faster. The feeling returned, eyes watching him from the shadows. When he reached his quarters, he found a brown envelope tucked under his door. He picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with bold letters written in red ink. "Leave Umudim before it's too late, just like Okori." Obinna's hands trembled. Whatever had happened to the last headmaster was not over, and now he was next. Obinna hardly slept that night. The warning letter lay on the table beside his bed, and his eyes kept returning to it. He kept replaying the words in his head, just like Okori. He rose before dawn, took his bath, and walked straight to the school compound. The sun had not yet risen, and a cold wind blew across the cracked walls. He wanted to clear his head. As he approached the mango tree, he saw someone standing there. It was an old man, slim, with a long walking stick and a faded wrapper tied around his waist. His eyes were sharp, almost too sharp for someone so old. "Good morning, sir," Obinna greeted politely. The man nodded. "So you are the one that came back?" "Yes, my name is Obinna Nwankwo. I'm the new headmaster." The old man didn't smile. He looked around carefully, then leaned closer. "Obinna," he said in a low voice, "the school is cursed." Obinna blinked. "Sir?" "You heard me. That land, where this school stands, it carries blood. A long time ago, something evil happened here, and since then, every headmaster who tries to change things disappears." Obinna swallowed hard. "What happened here?" The old man looked over his shoulder. "Ask the elders. Ask Chief Mba. Ask Uchechi. They know." Before Obinna could ask more questions, the man turned and slowly walked away, his stick tapping softly against the ground. That day in school, Obinna tried to focus. He taught his classes, smiled at the pupils, and acted like nothing was wrong. But in his heart, he knew something was very wrong. At break time, he walked into the staff room and faced Mrs. Uchechi. "Auntie, please tell me the truth," he said. "What happened to Mr. Okori?" Mrs. Uchechi's face changed immediately. Her eyes darted to the other teachers. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said sharply. "And if you're wise, you'll stop asking." She stood and left the room. Obinna looked around. All the other teachers avoided his eyes. No one said a word. That night he couldn't sleep again. Around midnight he heard something. A soft knock at the door. Once, twice, then silence. He tiptoed to the door, heart pounding. He opened it slowly, but no one was there. Just a fresh red feather lying on the ground. In Umudim, a red feather was not a good sign. It meant danger. It meant death. Obinna stared at the red feather on the ground. It was fresh, bright and clean. He picked it up carefully and looked around, but the night was silent. Not even the crickets dared to sing. He went back inside, locked his door, and placed the feather on his table beside the warning note. 2 signs, in just 2 days. Something or someone wanted him out of the village. And they were getting bolder. The next morning, after a restless night, Obinna visited the only person in the village he still trusted blindly, his mother's old friend, Mama Olama. She lived in a small mud house at the edge of the village, surrounded by herbs, dried leaves, and calabashes hanging from the ceiling. People called her Dibia woman, but Obinna knew she was more than that. She was wise, and she feared God. When she saw him, she smiled warmly. "My son, you have come." Obinna nodded and sat on the wooden stool she offered. He placed the red feather and the warning note on the table between them. She picked them up gently, studied them, and sighed. "Whoever left this feather is warning you the traditional way," she said. "This is not an ordinary warning. This is a sign from the Okute cult." Obinna's eyes widened. "Okute cult? I thought they were destroyed years ago." Mama Olama looked around and whispered, "Destroyed? My child, evil does not die. it only hides. Obinna leaned forward. What do they have to do with the school? She hesitated, then spoke slowly. That land, where the school stands, was once their shrine. Many years ago, during the war, the elders covered up what happened there. Blood was spilled, sacrifices were made, innocent lives were taken. When the war ended, the people built the school to cover the memory. But evil cannot be buried with cement. Obinna's heart raced. And Mr. Okori? She looked him in the eye. He tried to rebuild the school, dig new foundations. He uncovered something he shouldn't have. 3 days later, he vanished. Obinna stood up. Why didn't anyone report this? Fear, she replied simply. They feared the curse. They feared the cult. Mama Olama placed a hand on his shoulder. Obinna, if you want to live, leave that school alone. Let the past sleep. But Obinna shook his head. I didn't come back to run away. He walked out of her hut into the blazing sun, a new fire burning inside him. But behind him, Mama Olama whispered to herself, May your courage not be your downfall. Determined to get to the root of the mystery, Obinna arrived at school earlier than usual the next day. The sky was still dark, and the morning dew soaked the grass as he walked silently across the compound with a torchlight in hand. He wasn't going to run. He needed answers. He remembered something Mama Olama said. He tried to dig new foundations. That meant Mr. Okori must have found something buried, something hidden. Obinna headed to the oldest building in the school, the staff quarters that hadn't been used in years. The windows were broken, cobwebs covered the corners, and rats scattered when he opened the door. He searched the dusty room carefully, shining his light along the cracks in the walls. Then something caught his eye. One of the floor tiles near the far corner looked different. It wasn't cement like the others. It was wood and slightly raised. Obinna knelt and slowly pried it open. Underneath he found a small metal ring. He pulled it, and a square section of the floor lifted with a creak, a hidden trapdoor. His heart pounded. The air was thick and musty as he peered into the darkness below. With trembling hands he climbed down a short ladder into what looked like a narrow underground room. The torchlight flickered as he swept it around the space. There were wooden carvings of strange symbols, old rusted tools, a pile of torn books, and a blood-stained white cloth folded neatly on the ground. But the most terrifying thing was what stood in the centre of the room, a shrine. A small stone idol with red markings, surrounded by candle wax and bones. Obinna froze. Suddenly he heard footsteps above. Someone was in the staff quarters. Quickly he turned off the torchlight and crouched behind a stack of wooden boxes. The trapdoor creaked shut from above. He was locked in. For a few minutes there was silence. Then a deep voice spoke from above. You have entered where you shouldn't. If you want to live, forget what you saw. Obinna didn't respond. He waited. The person walked away, and silence returned. He stayed there for over an hour, thinking, breathing heavily, sweating in fear. When he finally climbed out, the sun was already rising. He dusted himself off and stood in the ruined room, staring at the closed trapdoor. Whatever Mr. Okori had found, Obinna had now found it too, and whoever didn't want the truth out, they were watching. The morning bell rang, echoing across the dusty school compound. Pupils rushed out from their classrooms and lined up on the assembly ground, chatting and giggling. But Obinna's mind wasn't there. He stood on the platform, his eyes scanning every teacher, every face, every movement. Someone had locked him inside that underground room. Someone who didn't want the truth to come out. Mrs. Uchechi led the pupils in morning prayers, but her voice sounded distant to Obinna. His mind replayed the symbols, the bones, the idol, and that voice. After prayers, Obinna stepped forward to address the school. Children, he began, this school is your future, and we will not let anything stop us from making it better. The children clapped, but Obinna noticed again none of the teachers did. As the pupils marched to their classes, Obinna walked to his office, where he found something strange waiting on his desk. It was a small brown parcel tied with red string. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a black and white photo, faded, torn at the edges. It showed 5 young men standing in front of a small shrine. One of them looked like a much younger Chief Mba. Another looked like Mrs. Uchechi. On the back of the photo were 5 names. Mba Okafor 2, Uchechi Nwaneri 3, Nadozi Obasi 4, Emmanuel Okori 5, Chigozi. Obinna's eyes stopped at the 4th name, Emmanuel Okori. The missing headmaster. He flipped the photo again and stared at it. Why would Okori be in a photo with the people now warning him to stay silent? He quickly hid the photo inside a book and locked his drawer. Just as he turned, the door opened and Mrs. Uchechi stepped in, holding a stack of files. "Headmaster," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I thought I'd bring these for you to sign." Obinna forced a smile and sat down. "Thank you, Ma." As she turned to leave, she paused by the door. "By the way," she said, "it's best not to enter the old staff quarters. It's not safe." Obinna froze. He hadn't told anyone he went there. How did she know? And more importantly, how many of them were watching his every move? That evening, Obinna locked his office and walked straight to Chief Mba's compound. He had made up his mind. It was time for confrontation. The village chief lived in a large, well-decorated house with a red zinc roof and carved wooden pillars. 2 fierce-looking dogs barked at Obinna as he stepped in, but a gatekeeper quickly hushed them. Chief Mba sat under a canopy in his compound, sipping palm wine and nodding to high-life music playing from a dusty radio. "Obinna," he greeted, raising his cup. "To what do I owe this visit?" Obinna didn't smile. "I found a photo, sir." Chief Mba's eyes twitched. Obinna continued, "A photo of you, Mrs. Uchechi, and 3 others, including Mr. Okori, standing in front of a shrine." The chief put down his cup, the music now sounding too loud. He reached forward and lowered the volume. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" Obinna asked. "I need to know what happened. Why is everyone hiding the truth?" Chief Mba looked around, then sighed deeply. "Sit down." Obinna sat. The chief began. "In 1984, Umudim was suffering. Crops were dying, children were falling sick, and nothing we did worked. A dibia from the neighbouring village told us the land was cursed unless we made a sacrifice. Not just goats or chickens. He said it had to be human." Obinna's stomach turned. "At first we refused. But then, one night, someone among us went ahead and did it. A boy from the village disappeared. They say his spirit was accepted, and soon after, the village began to prosper. Schools were built, roads repaired." "Who was the boy?" Obinna asked, voice low. Chief Mba looked away. "Nobody knows. They buried his name with his body. But since that day, the shrine was sealed underground, and we made a pact never to speak of it again. We built the school on top, thinking it would silence the past." Obinna's voice was shaking now. "And Mr. Okori?" "He found it, just like you," Chief Mba said. "He said he wanted to report it to the government. The next morning, he was gone." There was a long silence. Chief Mba leaned closer, his voice low and serious. "Obinna, you're a good man, a smart man, but this matter is bigger than you. Drop it, and I promise nothing will happen to you. Continue digging, and you'll disappear too." Obinna stood. "Thank you for your honesty, Chief. But if I run now, how many more will suffer later?" As he turned to leave, Chief Memba spoke one final sentence, cold and heavy. "You're already marked, my son, and once the spirits taste blood, they never forget." Obinna could feel it in his bones. He was being followed. After leaving Chief Mba's compound, he didn't return to his quarters immediately. Instead, he took a detour through the narrow forest path that led to the village stream. It was late evening, and the sun had already begun to dip below the hills. The leaves rustled softly above, but the stillness around him felt unnatural. He could sense someone or something watching. Suddenly he heard movement behind him. He turned sharply. A small figure darted into the bush. "Hey!" Obinna called. "Who's there?" No answer. He moved cautiously toward the sound, pushing aside tall grass and thorny vines. A small boy, no older than 10, crouching behind a tree. The boy looked strange. He wore no shoes, his clothes were torn, and his eyes held a sadness that pierced deep. Obinna stepped closer. "Are you lost?" The boy shook his head. "What's your name?" "Ejike," the boy whispered. "Where are your parents?" The boy hesitated, then looked up at Obinna. "They said I don't have any." Obinna frowned. "Who said that?" "The men in red. They brought me here. They said I must sleep under the ground." Obinna's heart stopped. "What do you mean? Where?" Ejike pointed toward the school. "There, where the stone man is." A chill ran through Obinna's spine. "The shrine?" he whispered. Ejike nodded slowly. "They put me inside, but I didn't sleep." Obinna knelt in front of him, now trembling. "When did this happen?" "Long ago," the boy said softly. "Before the last headmaster came. I tried to warn him, but they took him away." Obinna's mouth went dry. Are you alive, Ejike?" The boy smiled sadly. Not really. Suddenly the wind blew fiercely, and in a blink the boy vanished. Just like that, gone. Obinna stumbled back, heart racing. He looked everywhere, calling the boy's name. Nothing, just the rustle of the trees and the distant sound of drums coming from the village square, drums that sounded like a warning. Obinna rushed back to his quarters, locked his door and sat on his bed, breathing heavily. The boy had been real. He felt it, heard him, spoke with him. But if Ejike was telling the truth, then the story of the past was far darker than anyone had dared to reveal. And the spirits weren't just watching, they were speaking. Obinna could hardly sleep that night. His mind raced with the image of the boy, Ejike, and the haunting words he'd spoken. Before the last headmaster came, I tried to warn him, but they took him away. What did that mean? Had Ejike seen what happened to Mr. Okori? The chill in the room was unbearable, even though the evening air had been warm. Obinna wrapped himself in a blanket, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Around midnight, he heard it. A knock on the door. Soft at first, then louder. He froze. His heart thudded in his chest. Who could it be at this hour? He rose slowly, trying to be as quiet as possible, and crept toward the door. As he reached for the handle, the knock came again, more urgent this time. Obinna opened the door cautiously, expecting to see one of the teachers, or perhaps the gatekeeper. But when he looked out, the corridor was empty. The night outside was dark, save for the pale moonlight filtering through the trees. He stepped outside, scanning the school grounds, but there was no sign of anyone. Then, just as he was about to step back inside, he heard a faint voice, a whisper as though carried by the wind. "Obinna, the time has come." His breath caught in his throat. It was unmistakable. The voice was soft, almost ghostly, but it sounded familiar. "Who is it?" he called, his voice hoarse. No answer. Suddenly, the ground beneath him seemed to tremble, just slightly, and in the distance Obinna noticed something strange, a faint, flickering light coming from the old staff quarters. The place where the trapdoor had been. Without thinking, he turned and rushed toward the building. As he approached, the light grew brighter, and he could hear murmurs. It sounded like a gathering, a low chant. He hesitated at the door, heart hammering in his chest. Should he enter? Should he run? But then the door creaked open by itself. Obinna stepped inside. The light, now coming from a lantern, flickered on a small altar that had not been there before. The space was filled with a thick, burning incense that made his head spin. And then he saw them. Gathered around the altar were several familiar faces, Chiefenba, Mrs. Uchechi, the gatekeeper, and others he didn't recognize. Their eyes were closed, and they chanted in low voices, the words unfamiliar but heavy with meaning. Obinna stood frozen in the doorway. They didn't notice him. They didn't even seem to know he was there. But then one of the men, the one who had been standing closest to the altar, slowly opened his eyes, and for the first time their gaze met. Obinna's blood ran cold. The man's face was familiar. He looked like a much younger version of someone Obinna had seen in the village, but there was something unnatural about his expression. His eyes were dark, almost lifeless. He stood, and the chanting immediately stopped. The others turned to look at Obinna. "You shouldn't be here," the man said, his voice low and cold. Before Obinna could respond, the man stepped forward, his hand raised. Obinna's vision blurred, and suddenly the world spun around him. He staggered back, his legs giving way beneath him, and then everything went black.